it's Mitch with DrywallInstruction.com. Let's take a few minutes and talk about finishing tools. We'll talk about pans and knives and hawks and trowels in this segment. Let's start with knives and start with the smaller knives that they make. I think the smallest is a 1-inch knife. They may make a smaller one, but the 1-inch knife is one of the smallest. And then you'll notice that they make knives in half-inch increments as they go up. And so you'll see in the pictures, I'm showing you some of my knives. They're not pretty. They've been used a lot. When you use knives, they change color a little bit and look a little different. But in my selection here, I've got several different sizes as they go up. You'll recognize right away that you probably won't need all of these different size knives on the project that you're doing. I have been doing this. I'm in different situations all the time, so I've accumulated all the different sizes as I've worked. The most common size knife is a 6-inch knife. And a 6-inch knife, and I'll say this right now, you'll want to get a good stainless steel knife when you do your work. I've been on jobs where they have little plastic knives, and it's just not going to work very well for you and turn out very successful. So you'll want to get you a good metal knife. The 6-inch knife, I've got a couple of different styles of 6-inch knife here, and I've been using this style of knife for years. I just recently came across a little different style 6-inch knife that I really like. One of the issues that I ran into, that I haven't run into in my experience as a drywaller, is the metal that they were using for the knives got cheaper and not as strong. In the past, I've had a knife break and be a little too brittle or something like that on occasion, but what I've noticed lately is the metal is softer and it bends, the blade just bends. And so, again, I found this style and I really like it. From 6-inch, you go up in different increments again to a 12-inch knife. I've got a couple of different 12-inch knives here. I've got a plastic handled one as well as a wood handled one. One thing to realize or understand with knives is that with the smaller knives, this doesn't come into play, but the bigger knives, as you use them, they'll develop a curve in the blade one way, so it'll have a curve to it. That's important to understand because when you're coating, you'll want to know which way that curve is, and also, and we'll explain that more in later segments, but also if you're wiping texture, which you do with, sometimes hand textures are easier with knives than they are with trowels, and so you'll want to know which way your curve is so that you don't have lines in your mud as easy. So those are the drywall knives. With drywall knives, the more you use them, the better they get, actually. A new drywall knife doesn't have a very sharp edge to it, and so it's not as easy to get a really smooth finish. As they get older, this knife sharpens with the mud, and so you want to be careful with that because you can cut yourself on the knives if you're not careful. But that principle is important to understand. So those are your knives. With knives, you use a pan, and so with a pan, I've got a couple of different examples of pans here. I've got a metal pan and also a plastic pan. And the plastic pans are lighter, but they're not as durable. They work in certain circumstances. Long term, if you're using the pan a lot, the metal pan will be a lot better way to go. Even though it's heavier, it's definitely more durable, and it's just works better. They come in different sizes and different lengths, the pans do, and so those are your pans. To load your pan, you're typically going to use a knife and get the mud out of your bucket and load it into your pan, fill up your pan, and then work with it. And so this plastic pan you can see it has little metal edges to wipe your mud off. They're a decent product. I've used plastic pans in the past. I use metal pans a lot more often. And so from there, let's talk about trowels a little bit. These are drywall trowels. I've got a couple different ones of different lengths. Drywall trowels are very similar to concrete trowels. The manufacturer that I use actually makes concrete and drywall trowels. When I looked at them, they're the same trowel. And so because I use a stainless steel trowel with a wood handle, You might wonder why on earth people would use trowels in drywall. And I did too for a time. When I first learned, the first business that I worked for, a drywall business that I worked for, we used just pans and knives. And long story short, I came home, worked for a professional outfit here in Central Oregon, and they said, if you're going to work here, you'll have to use a hawk and trowel. And so I did, and I haven't put it down since. I really like the way a hawk and trowel perform, and so I use that in my coating technique and coating process, and also in texturing. When you use a trowel, you use a hawk to carry your mud. A hawk is a flat metal surface with a handle on it. You load your hawk with like a mud mixer, or you can load it with your knife too, and you take your mud off of your hawk and spread it. And so you can carry actually more mud this way, and I guess that's why I like it too. For speed, for me, it's a much faster process. But in later segments, we'll do hawk versus trowel, or trowel versus knife, and we'll show you the benefits, the strengths and weaknesses of both methods. So the other thing that I was going to show you really quick before I'm done is the corner tool. And this is a drywall corner tool. This is meant to be able to coat your corner seams on both sides at the same time. I'll be honest with you, I've never got a corner tool to work. For me, it just has never worked out. I'll just coat my angles on one side, let them dry, and then coat the other. But some people really believe in them and love them, and I say all the power to them. So when you look at some of the taping, textbook taping instruction, they talk about 4 coats a lot of times. And it's not necessarily true that you have to do 4 coats with 4 different sizes of knives. And so in a later segment, I'll explain that process, but I think that typically, as far as knives go, you'll very possibly be able to get away with having a 6-inch knife and a 12-inch knife. Now, it's not one or the other for people. It's not like the hawk and trowel guys don't have any knives in the knife, or vice versa. If you use a hawk and trowel, you still have to have knives in different cases. The trowel is mainly used for coating big stuff or texturing or doing that type of a thing. And so you'll always have a need for the different knives. Sometimes the little knives are handy for little small areas. Maybe you have just a really narrow area to get into. And they all have a purpose, but you could probably get away with a 6 and a 12 on the basic taping projects that you do. This is just a brief review of the finishing tools. I hope it's helpful to you, and you'll continue to follow us here at drywallinstruction.com.